Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining our webinar. I'm Mike Samboy. I'm the Global Marketing Director for AutoRABIT, and I'm going to be your host for this 30-minute session. In this session, we are going to give you an overview of AutoRABIT Ironhorse, also known as version 4.2.1. It's going live on September 2nd. And in this brief overview, we'll highlight some of the changes and enhancements to the UI that will increase your release throughput, improve governance, and make your CI/CD pipeline easier to manage. Joining me today is Abhilash Murali. Abhi is a product manager here at AutoRABIT, also a trailblazer in his own right. You co-facilitate the Fremont Salesforce Developers Group.
Yep, that's right.
And he's going to go ahead and highlight some of the best of the almost 50 features and enhancements that we packed into this release. So let's get started here. Go ahead, next slide. This is the legal statement in the video, the video recording of this that will release to you. You can read this in its entirety if you'd like to. So what are we going to cover today? We are going to tell you a little bit about what's in AutoRABIT Ironhorse. We're going to give you an overview of the key features, like I mentioned, give you some information on how you can learn even more about Ironhorse, and then we'll answer some questions that you guys have. So, Abhi, next slide. If you look, this is the interface on the webinar for how you ask a question. You can submit a question at any time. We will hold the questions till the end and answer them all at once. But you click on the Q&A icon down there at the bottom, type in your question in the field, and click submit. And we'll get to that at the end of the session. So I've been getting asked lately, why is this release called Ironhorse? Well, our releases are now going to be named after trails. And this particular trail, the Ironhorse Regional Trail, is here in San Ramon, California, where Abhi and I are, and it runs right past the AutoRABIT headquarters. So it's a meaningful trail to us, and we thought it was a great one to use for this release. So what's in AutoRABIT Ironhorse? There's three key buckets of things that we focused on in this release. New features and feature enhancements to accelerate your CI pipeline, additional integrations to reduce manual steps, and increase security to level up your security. And we are going to touch on some of these. We won't get to all of them in this 30-minute session, but we will tell you how you can find out more. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Abhi, and he's going to walk you through the live demo.
All right. Thank you very much, Mike. So let me get set up here real quick. Let's jump into AutoRABIT. Make sure that things are good here. Alrighty, so welcome everybody to AutoRABIT Ironhorse. So as Mike mentioned, we have about 50 different features as part of this release, but as he mentioned, it's hard to go through all 50. So I've picked about a couple of the most important ones that I think everybody should be aware of. And of course, you could read our release notes in order to see all the other features that we are offering. But first and foremost, we'll actually get started with our Salesforce DX integration. So this might come as a surprise to some. Some of you may already know about this. So for the past couple of months, if you're one of the lucky customers, so to speak, you might have had a chance to go through a pilot program to try out our DX integration and play around with it, and also give us your feedback, which really helped us improve it. And now we're ready to finally have our GA release, which will be as a part of AutoRABIT Ironhorse. So what I'll do is just briefly go through each of these sections, kind of explain what each of them are supposed to do. So let's start off with the DevHub management screen. So this is where you'll manage your DevHub itself. Go ahead and register that, as well as manage the permissions, so who can access this particular DevHub. And by the way, when I say DevHub, this could even be your production environment. You can enable that as your developer hub. So just as a side note there. You can also register and or create a scratch org directly from the UI. There's no need to go through a CLI command or anything of that sort. We just offered a bunch of buttons here for you to take care of the same commands you would do through the Salesforce CLI. And also, you can see all your scratch orgs. So for my particular DevHub I have here, I have 2 orgs that I'd created. I can manage it from this and delete it. I could also open it up in order to make any changes. Now, if I want to share credentials, maybe to Mike, I want him to actually go ahead and play around with this, help me out with a particular integration that I'm building out. I can actually go ahead and share my credentials with him, as well as manage permissions. So if I want to only give Mike access to only do data loader jobs, but he cannot do any other module within AutoRABIT, I could actually specify that. So it's very neat in order to actually keep everybody in control within these environments. Now, the next section that I'm going to talk about is probably where you'll spend about 90% of your time, as this is where all the magic happens, so to speak. So what this section is called is user story management, and I think is pretty self-explanatory. This is where we integrate with an ALM solution of your choice, be it Jira, be it CI Agile, VSTS, or even our own AutoRABIT ALM solution, which I'll get to in just a moment. But let me actually open up one of the user stories here. So this is one that I just worked on just for the webinar. So you'll see that it pulled in my user story, and we're using Jira for this example. And it also gave me my Scratch org that I created and assigned to this user story. And just to take a step back here, what is a Scratch org? So a developer hub is what you'll enable in order to actually create these Scratch orgs, which again, it could be a production, and a subset of that will be a Scratch org, kind of like, from production, you're spinning up developer sandboxes. Now, the difference is that a Scratch org is empty. In other words, there's only standard metadata components there. You will not find any custom code, which means before you can even start developing, you will have to deploy any custom code into that Scratch org for you to start your particular user story. Now, I've also created a branch. You can see a naming convention here. They all follow the same as the user story. And that's actually the two buttons that are missing here. You'll actually see when you first create a user story, I have assign a Scratch org and assign a branch. I've already done those two steps, so you see that here. And in this case, I have a Bitbucket repository that I connected to it, but we do support many varieties, such as, of course, Git being the most common, but we also do support SVN and TFS. So we have a wide variety of source control systems we can integrate with. Now, I mentioned about loading metadata. That can be done using the load metadata button in order to move any sort of custom code into your Scratch org. And essentially, we're reutilizing the existing features of the AutoRABIT stack, such as the ability to do commits, the ability to perform merges from your particular branches, as well as doing deployments from the Scratch org to maybe another environment. And I know it's hard to see, but some of the other buttons here that are grayed out are validating the Scratch org, making sure that any integrations or applications or whatever it is that you're building is going to be ready to go, and you won't have any deployment failures. You can also run Apex tests as well as run data migrations. So you might notice a pattern here. This is all actually in a flow. So you can take care of every item, go one by one, and go down the flow, and by the end of it, you're ready to actually release. Now you'll notice here that I do have a commit section, and I just made one little test commit just to show you what it looks like. You'll notice here in the committed files that I have an Apex class that I had committed. And at the bottom here is just a notes section that you can actually, type in there you like. I just put test there just for the sake of a demo, but any notes that you want to have on there to keep track of this user story, you can do that. Again, this is this page where you find yourself, spending the most time on. Now there's two more sections to this integration. Another one is AutoRABIT ALM management. Now I alluded to this earlier, but we actually built out our own ALM tool. The only caveat here is it's only available for the Salesforce DX integration. So if you'd like to create your own sprint, by all means, you can do so. You could also create your own user stories. So I could give it a name. I could go ahead and select a priority as I wish to. Same thing with a type, as well as statuses. We have many different statuses to choose from. And obviously, we can always work with you to change these as needed. So this will be your single point. No need for a Jira or anything like that. This can all be managed within AutoRABIT if you're using our DX integration. Now, one last component that I wanted to show, and that was template management. Now, this is quite important. This is going back to the whole idea about loading metadata into Scratch orgs. So, for instance, let's say that I want to build something on the sales app. And I need all of my custom code and objects and classes or whatever I have, and I need to deploy that into the Scratch org. So I can either pull that from a Salesforce org or from version control. In my case, I'll just go ahead and pull it from a Salesforce org. If I say show metadata members, it's going to give me a list of all the metadata members that are available. And if I click on one and expand it, it'll actually give me what is available. So if I click on class, it'll show me all the classes. Now the difference here is when I select these metadata components, it's not just a one-time deployment. I could save this as a template. So each time that I need to spin up a scratch org, it'll automatically go ahead and not only create the scratch org, but AutoRABIT will also deploy these set of components you specify. So as soon as the environment is ready, I can start my development work. There is no downtime. There is no going manually and selecting whatever items you want. No CLI commands, none of that. So it's very easy for you to manage, and it's quite powerful as you actually use it. And I know that was a very quick overview of this, but that's really it for each of the sections of the Salesforce DX integration. Now, just as a side note, we do have a whole 1 hour long demo on our YouTube channel that'll explain very clearly of what this integration does, as well as I show a complete scenario. So be sure to check that out if you're interested in this particular integration. But with that, what I'll do is move on to some of the other items. So one of the first sections we will start off with is my account. And within this particular section, you'll see there is an option for SSO configuration. So yes, AutoRABIT does now support single sign-on. This can be configured within AutoRABIT itself. Now, essentially, what we do is we do support an OpenID protocol here, and in conjunction with Okta to provide this integration. So if your company does enforce an SSO policy, by all means, you can utilize AutoRABIT to set this up. And we will work with you in order to make this happen. So from a security perspective, it makes it a lot easier for you, and especially when working with our customers, security is probably one of the biggest things that matters to us as well as our customers. Now, taking this one step further from this SSO configuration is Active Directory integration. So for our enterprise customers or those that are having an on-premise installation of AutoRABIT, you'll benefit from connecting to your Active Directory server. So you'll see here, there's a new section called Identity Management. And if I click on this checkbox, I can actually go ahead and set up my server details. So again, if you have an on-premise installation of AutoRABIT, you can take advantage of Active Directory and set up SSO while connecting to this server. So it's definitely quite powerful, and it's definitely unique to us. And we'll be improving this as time goes on, as we get a little bit more feedback from our customers, of course. So let me go ahead and close this just so I could show one other item. And that's going to be a minor change to this ALM management section. So you're probably already aware of this. You know that we integrate many different ALM solutions, be it Jira or CI Agile or VSTS. But now we're having the option in order to have multiple or combinations of ALM systems to be integrated within our solution. So you'll notice here I have 2 different Jiras. They point to 2 different URLs that I've already connected. But you can also say that, I want to connect to CI Agile. So you can do that. And this is useful for those of you that have, bigger projects to work on, or maybe you're doing parallel development with multiple projects and different teams that are working on maybe using different solutions. This will solve your problem. Now, the same functionality remains, such as you can commit your code through AutoRABIT and also update the user story status in your ALM solution. Also, you can make deployments. So let's say that I want to do a deployment on user stories that are in the done status. I can do so. So the same functionality remains. We're just allowing you to have more integrations plugged in. So that's it for the admin section. Let me kind of clean up some tabs here just so I could open a few more. So another section we'll move into is just CI. So there's one minor item here. Now again, we're doing highlights here. So I'll cover one small section that's gone through a big change, and I think this will be quite useful. And this is going to be for our run tests based on changes feature. So just for those that are on the call that don't know what a run test based on changes does, essentially it's going to take a look at your deployment package and be able to identify any test classes that need to be run and run those test classes. Now, through talking to our customers and whatnot, what we found out is especially for a production environment or sometimes environments where maybe you don't want to run all tests or run all local tests, it does take up a lot of time. So instead, what we've designed is a way for you to map your tests. In other words, you tell us what are the tests that you want to run by default. So if there are no dependent test classes, let's say, to select, when you use this option, we'll automatically run whatever tests you specify to run as your default, and it will run as part of your deployment. So in other words, you don't really need to use local or all tests. If you could get away with it, just go ahead and use this functionality here. So it's quite easy to set up as well. And again, we'll kind of dive into a little deeper demo on this at a future time. Now, next, we'll move into version control. Now, I know I'm going a little faster, but bear with me. So next is going to be into our new easy commit section here. So this is a new UI that we came up with in the previous release, which a lot of you seem to like, so that's good for us. think we did something right on this one. But what I want to draw your attention to is retrieval type, where we have velocity components. So for those of you that use velocity, yes, we now have continuous integration for velocity itself. So you can go ahead and commit your velocity components through AutoRABIT to a branch they specify in any version control solution, SVN, Git, or TFS. And we could go ahead and manage that. You can go ahead and merge these changes, whatever you like to do. You can definitely do that through AutoRABIT now for your velocity components. Now, the next thing here is you can also deploy your velocity metadata through AutoRABIT. So that's going to be part of the CI processes. So if you were to create a CI process to allow you to deploy these components, you can actually deploy them to multiple sandboxes at once if you so wish to. Really makes it much easier for you and enhances your CI journey, because we have a lot of customers that have many different integrations, and velocity is something that's been asked for so long that we finally decided to make it happen. So this is just the beginning. We'll definitely be improving on this as time goes on. So why don't we move on to another section here? And this is going to be our queue-based deployment model. So I'll let you know what this means as we get into this section. So when we jump into what's called commit validation history, this has a number of different items to this. One of the items would be that this will take care of a deployment validation of your code. We could run static code analysis. We could also do code coverage, show you a difference report as far as what's different between your source, in case it could be a sandbox, and your destination, which could be a branch. And once you do all of this, you can also have an approval process. So let me actually switch to a different branch here to show you what it looks like. So for this one, you'll see that I have a deployment that failed. So obviously, I wouldn't want to approve this as a commit if I was a release manager. So I could actually go in and say reject, for example, give my comments, hey, you did not meet the criteria for static code analysis, or your deployment failed, make sure you include those dependencies, and then maybe I'll let you through. So that's essentially the premise behind why we have this feature. So essentially, it's to promote the most healthiest of code down into each of your branches. But where we made the change is this little tab here that says deployment workspace. So let me set the stage for this particular integration. So what happens here is from the Salesforce side, there is a limitation where if a deployment is in progress and we try to go ahead and trigger another deployment, Salesforce will do one of two things. It'll either go ahead and put that deployment in a pending and or standby state, or it'll end up terminating that particular deployment call, which is the latter is what most of our customers have been facing. So you might have situations where you ran a pre-validation and you never got a result and you have to rerun that process. And that's because of Salesforce terminating that deployment. So instead, what we've done is we created a queue model. Every time you run a pre-validate or commit process, as I showed on the screen there, we'll queue them up so you can see exactly where you are on the queue. And beyond that, only one at a time will actually release this into the Salesforce side. So we can make sure that you do in fact get a result for all of your pre-validation or deployment validations, whatever it is. And essentially what this does is it reduces the time for you in order to, one, set this up, two, come back and find out that your deployment or validation didn't go through, you need to come back and you need to rerun the whole process again. This will just save a lot of time and a lot of headache from that standpoint. So in turn, obviously, will make a development cycle a lot faster. And just as a side note, this is something that would be expanding to other areas of AutoRABIT as well. I know that's a question that might get asked, so I thought I'll go ahead and address that right now itself. So this will come out to other areas. So let's move on to merge. So there's a minor change here, not necessarily for the merge process itself, but rather for how conflicts are handled. So basically, if I were to open this up here, you'll see this is our conflict resolution page. I just have just a conflict on a description I quickly made just to show what it looks like if I'm in my developer branch and I'm trying to merge into an integration environment. What would it look like? What are the conflicts that come up? Now, to the astute eye, you might see there's one small change here, such as path and tree view. So this is really designed just to give you a little bit more granularity, as well as ability to see what are the metadata components that are in conflict. So in here, you'll see that this gives you just a path view as far as the object, and my chain object here is called destructive, or a tree view where I can expand the metadata type, and it'll give me a list of all the conflicting files of that metadata type. So this was a common request, especially for large enterprises that have large number of conflicts, they're deploying over 2,000 components, for example, and obviously you will end up having some kind of conflicts there. Maybe it's 10 different profiles that are conflicting. This just gives it a little bit more an easier way to manage that. But where we made a significant change to the merge editor feature here would be the downloading and uploading of conflicts. So for a lot of customers, going back to the example of large enterprises, is sometimes you may have a profile that have over 30,000 lines of code, and this wasn't the case for one of our customers. And it's hard to load that big line of code on the UI here without taking a lot of time. So, and you may not be able to see all the conflicts that you'd like to. So instead, what we've done is we alert you and let you know that you could download this conflict, and you'll get a download report that looks something like this. We'll give you a .git folder. In my case, because it's Git that I'm using, we'll give you this folder as well as the actual file. In this case, it was an object that was conflicting. And this essentially will give you all the files you need, such as the base file, the local, the remote, and so forth. And essentially what this does is you could use your favorite tools, such as TortoiseGit or maybe SourceTree, in order to resolve these conflicts in your local machine. And once the conflicts are resolved, you can go ahead and upload those conflicts using the upload button here. Now, just because you click on upload doesn't mean that you'll just upload it right away. Of course, we're gonna do a little bit of checks here. One of the checks that we'll do is scan your package, make sure that you're following the XML structure properly, as well as we'll also do another check to make sure you're following the Salesforce metadata structure properly. And only if these two meet, we will actually let you upload that file. And then only after that can you actually do the merge. So this gives you a little bit more clarity and making sure that you don't have any sort of errors in a future deployment just because you're missing one XML tag, for example. So we'll make sure that we'll take care of those particular items before actually letting you go through with the upload and resolving the conflict itself. So I have three more things that I wanted to touch upon before we kind of wrap things up. So one is kind of an explanation. I can't necessarily show this, but this is going to be a significant enhancement we made to the way we handle our profiles and permission sets through AutoRABIT. And this is going to be both for our commits as well as for deployments, but commits are a little bit more of the focus right now. So let me give you an example. So in a traditional fashion, you went ahead to your Salesforce environment, maybe you made a fee level security change. And when you try to commit that change, using the metadata API, in order to retrieve that permission, you need to include not only the profile, but you also need to include that field that you modified. That's the only way that Salesforce will allow you to retrieve that particular permission. Now, in cases where you forget that dependency, of course, you find out later that that commit never went through, you never fetched that permission, and you have a headache now with your profiles, which is a common scenario that I'm sure almost all of you on this call probably went through at least once, twice, maybe more. Now, what we've done is that we're allowing you to do full profile or full permission set commits as well as deployments. What this means is I can go ahead and select an option saying full profile commit. It'll take your entire profile and commit that to a branch. So instead of selecting a bunch of different dependencies, you could go ahead and select that particular feature. We'll automatically move that profile. We'll take care of the deltas as well if you've already committed this one time, and ensure that your profiles are moving successfully. So no need to remember every single dependency or change in order to actually retrieve those particular metadata components or permissions. And the other item here is that you could do a full profile deployment. Now, you might be thinking, wait a minute, didn't we already have this feature before? We did. However, this is much more improved in the sense that now that we're able to leverage a full profile commit, we can just take a single revision now and do a full profile deployment. So it makes it a lot easier to promote this across all of your environments. And it's kind of a way to say that you don't have to have a hassle with profiles. And we all know profiles and permission sets are one of the most convoluted metadata types in Salesforce. And you think you got it right, and the next release you find out you didn't. So it's one of those things that Salesforce constantly keeps convoluting more and more. So all we can do is do what we can to make sure that we can help you guys out as much as possible. So another item that I want to cover that some of you might be interested in is our Data Loader Pro. So there's one item here that we made a slight change to, and that's going to be when you run a data loader process. And there's an extra option here called automatically apply master object filter on other dependency objects. So a lot of words, but let me explain what this means. So if I were to switch this to a graph view, this will actually give me a better way to explain this. So you'll see that I have a, this is my data schema for my particular data migration I was trying to do. And in this case, when we say master object, we mean the object that you're going to be the focus of attention in order for AutoRABIT to fetch your data schema from. In other words, fetching the child as well as parents. Now, in my example here, contact was set as my master object. So there were child shown. I didn't pick any child objects for the sake of this example, but I went ahead and just picked only contact. It automatically fetched my account and a couple of other levels of hierarchies here to show me that I do have some more relevant records that might get picked up. Now, just to give a little background, when you run a data loader process with an AutoRABIT, we'll first start off with the master object. It will automatically pick up all related records from your parents and ancestors and so forth. Now, some of the problem here was that for some of our customers, they had a lot of connections or relationships. Mine only goes to one level. It goes on and on and on. So it was hard to go through and apply filters for every single parent record, because sometimes, when you have, let's say, 1 million records, and you limit it to maybe 10,000. And even in that 10,000, it pulls a lot of other extra records because they were connected in some way to this master object. You're ending up with a lot more records that you may not want, as well as it was hard to keep track of what's actually coming through into AutoRABIT. So what we've done now is when you apply a filter on the master object, you can select that option, and that same filter you applied on the master object, we applied across all of these objects. So when you run a data migration process, that filter will be enforced, making sure that only the most relevant records are being picked up, even if there is multiple relationships. And it gives you a lot more control over your data, especially when you're trying to spin up a UAT environment, for example. And last but not least that I wanted to show before I hand it back to Mike would be a minor change we made to our deployment screen here. And if I click on rollback, so you'll see here when I click on rollback, we have a couple of sections that are new, such as choose your pre and post destructive changes. So essentially what we're trying to say here is for a lot of our customers, when you're doing a rollback and maybe you had destructive changes as part of your deployment, when you do a rollback, sometimes it ends up creating some sort of errors or failures. So now we're giving you the option to where we'll list all of the components that you had as part of your destructive change. You can specify, do you want to run as a pre-step or a post-step? Select what you want. And after that, when you're ready to do the rollback, we made this case sensitive. So only if I type rollback, it will enable the yes button. Even if I put just a lowercase k here, it will not let you. This is for security reasons. This way you don't accidentally roll back your changes. And only if you type this out, you give you the permission to have the rollback itself. So this is a minor change that we actually made to this. Now again, this was a highlight of some of the more important changes. Now with the limited time that we have, there's a lot more that is available. But before we open it up to questions, I did see that there were a few that came in. I'll actually hand it over to Mike to actually cover a few things before we open it up. So Mike, back over to you.
Thanks, Abhi. So how do you find out more? We've covered a lot very quickly. If you want to find out more about Ironhorse, there's three things you can do. You can contact your friendly AutoRABIT representative. If you don't have that information handy, send an email to info@autorabit.com. You can go to our website, click on the request a demo button, the orange button up in the right-hand corner, or you can click on this banner that you see here that's on our homepage about Dreamforce, and that will take you to a book an appointment registration page. Here you can go ahead and request a 30-minute slot in our AutoRABIT meeting suite. In addition to being booked for the AutoRABIT meeting suite, you will be added to our killer after party guest list. That's happening the Tuesday night of Dreamforce. It is the closest after party to the event, located right on the rooftop of Moscone North. You have awesome views of the city, appetizers, open bar, and with that you can network with others, or you can dance to the music being provided by DJ Ramona, or you can do both. You can network while you're dancing. So go ahead and fill out the form. We'll book a slot in the meeting suite with you, and we will get you onto the party list. So now questions. A few did come in. Let's see. One is, how are sandbox templates in Salesforce DX useful?
Good question. So I kind of alluded to this a little bit during the presentation, but essentially that's going to be for your creating your scratch orgs. Now the thing is that, as I mentioned, when you're creating a scratch org, there is no custom metadata. You have to load in metadata to even start working on it, unless you're building like a fresh app that you don't really need it. Now, you can either manually go in, go one by one, click each different options, which you can't do in AutoRABIT. As I mentioned, there was that load metadata button, if you recall, during the DX presentation, and you can actually load your metadata that way. But the advantage of the template is it's a lot more faster. Everything that you save there is going to be used in different parts of AutoRABIT in terms of the DX integration. I can also go ahead and edit those templates whenever I like. So in my example, I shared with you the sales app. So let's say that I did a new release. We updated the sales app now, and there's more custom development done. I can always go back and edit that template, and I can always use it for any scratch org I create. So rather than having a scratch org that takes maybe, let's just use a time here off the top of my head, 10 minutes to create, we could get it done in 2 minutes because the deployment and everything gets taken care of right when you create that scratch org. So you can actually select that template immediately, and scratch org is up and running to actually start your development.
Great, Avi. One more question. So we're kind of running out of time. One is, I think you mentioned SSO integration. Is it with OpenID or
SAML, yeah.
Or SAML.
So basically, the integration is for both. So we can work with OpenID or we can work with SAML. That's going to be, of course, determined at the time of implementation. We'll work with you to understand how your framework is set up and how we can actually help you. But we do support both.
Great. So we've run a minute over. If you've asked questions, I'll go ahead and we'll follow up with you individually after the webinar. But just wanted to thank everybody for attending. Let's go back to the slides. So you will receive a recording of this webinar within 24 hours. That'll go to your email. We hope that you'll go and book a meeting with us and get on the guest list for our awesome party. We want to meet with you. We want to party with you at Dreamforce. And if you need to contact us, you can reach us at info@autorabit.com, or you can go to autorabit.com and click on the request a demo. So thanks for attending. This concludes our webinar. Have a great day.
Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good one.